Okay, we are now recording. Welcome, Sahar Delajani. This is my friend Sahar. I'm Abigail Tartellin, but many of you will be watching on Instagram, so you'll know that. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how Sahar and I met, because it's quite a meet cute, author-wise, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah.
We had both of our books were like big books of the London Book Fair 2012. Sahar's particularly, Children of the Jacaranda Tree, is this beautiful novel that I'm actually going to let you describe a little bit later at the end, so that we can, and show people some covers so we can get people buying. But Sahar's book and my book sold to Arzu Tarzan, who was at Orion at Weiderfeld and Nicholson at the time. She's responsible for publishing Khaled Hosseini's The Kite Runner, The Tiger's Wife, and we were both pretty chuffed to be with her, and she recommended my book to Sahar's already then editor in the States, Sarah Rand.
Yes, yes.
At Atria at Simon & Schuster. And so we ended up being publishing buddies with the same editors.
Publishing sisters.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to get you on, apart from being one of my favorite writers, because this series is my favorite writers, is to talk about somebody who had a debut novel that came out a little while ago and is building a career from that. Because I think a lot of the people who follow me were debut novelists like a year ago or a couple of years ago, or just writing a new book. So firstly, will you tell us a bit about Children of the Jacaranda Tree? And would you mind showing us the covers again? This happened last week, but I don't have my books because I moved during lockdown and I didn't bring them all with me. So
sure. This is the UK paper edition of Children of the Jacaranda Tree, and this is the US paperback edition. So
I love that one.
Came out in 2013, since the hardcover was in 2012 with you. So this was yes, my debut novel. And it was partly based on my own life story. I was born in Iran. Like, I grew up in the States, but I was born in Iran. And there was a revolution in Iran in 1979, and in 1983 there was a huge crackdown on all political activists. And my parents were at the time like leftist activists doing work, underground work, and they were both.
I've had hang on, Sahar, I've had a little freeze when you were saying what your parents were doing at the time in 1983. Could you repeat that for us? And sure. I apologize if it's freezing for people.
That's okay. Like, mine is too. I don't know. It might be even my internet. I don't know. But let me know whenever it freezes. But so you're gonna edit this out, or you're gonna? Is this?
I might try to.
Okay. But you don't have to. But so basically, the book is based on like my parents' arrest in 1983, and my mother was pregnant with. They were leftist activists. And so the first of the book, Children of the Jacaranda Tree, is about the circumstances of children my generation, the circumstances they were born in and were raised. So it begins with a woman who's pregnant in prison, and which was very much based on what my mom told me about the story of my birth. And and there was the Iran-Iraq war going on, and so there was a lot happening. And then in 1988, there was mass executions of these prisoners. So the first part is about those children being born in such circumstances. And then the second part is all those children now grown-ups wanting to make their own voices heard and sort of continuing the path, but wanting to make their own decisions about their country and the future of the country. And so it's partially based on true facts. A lot of it, of course, is fiction, and a lot of it is also based on historical facts that were happening at the time.
And there was like a slight pause at one point, and that was when Sahar was saying that her mother was in Evan prison when
Yes.
you were born.
When I was born,
And
yes.
so part of the book is, although it's a novel and it's fictional, part of the book covers that time, and it's based on that well, your mum's experience and your experiences growing up with your
Exactly.
granny, with your nan.
Exactly, with my grandparents. So it was me and my brother and my cousin who was also born in prison because my aunt was also in prison at the time. So we were all staying with my grandparents until like the release of first my mom and then my dad. And then there was execution of my uncle, my dad's brother, which is also part of the book. So 2 chapters of the book are based inside prison, and those 2 chapters are very much based on true facts. I didn't want to add anything or subtract. I wanted it to be as true and as real as possible. And then the rest of them are just sort of inspired by what was happening. So there's a grandmother character and all these cousins and friends and so on who were sort of going through the same troubles.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that so you're currently at your parents' house.
I
And
am.
they're okay.
And they're okay. Yes, yes. They're both fine. Fortunately, they were both released before the executions happened and have gone through a lot, but survived everything. And now we're trying to survive COVID-19 as well.
Yeah. I mean, as you can tell, listening, like Sahar is an amazing novelist, but she's also an amazing person that she can have a big smile on her face and be like, yes, they survived. This. I'm always like, how can you talk about, and also I think the book's published in 30 languages, so you've traveled a lot and talked about it a lot, and I think it's a rare gift to be able to be inspiring and talk about something so dark and to like bring people in and do it with warmth and to be able to find humor in those moments.
I know. I mean, well, I think I don't do it intentionally. It just comes out like that. But I think one reason is that you probably know this. Like as an author, like we put a lot of emotion, especially of course if it's a personal story like mine was, a lot of emotion in that writing that is as if we come out of it, as if there's been like a cleansing or something, you know. And of course it still makes me sad when I'm like by myself thinking about it, writing about it, or in some, you know, very serious situations, maybe that when there are other survivors and so on, of course, like I lose my smile then. But I think because this book has really helped me be able to first talk about it. I never talked about it before the book. It was like top secret in our family. And then second, to just be like, talk about it with calm and, you know. And then, you know, there's also the fact that I don't take any of it personally. I think we're part of that history. And we have to be angry about that happening, not necessarily because it happened to us. I would be the same. We should be the same if it happened to someone else. So I think there's also that. I don't take the whole thing as something done specifically to us. Yeah.
Did the book also help your parents talk about it? Because presumably if you didn't talk about it before, when it came out,
Yeah.
you know, that's the awkward thing about being an author and being close with your family, is that they read your book and, you know, in terms of mine, talk about like genitalia and things, and then in terms of your book, talk about things that they went through that, you know, were huge times in their lives that defined them, presumably.
Yeah, I think you know, in the beginning when the book first came out, I kept having all these nightmares um, of them drowning, or parts of my family drowning, and I had to save them, and I couldn't. I had all these anxiety dreams because there's such huge responsibility that comes with it. First, are you even telling the stories in the right way? And second, you're forcing them to talk because you wanted to talk.
Yeah.
And it's their life. It's primarily their life. But I think overall, especially my dad had always been comfortable talking about it, but my mom not so much. And I think the trauma of a pregnant woman is probably incomparable to anything and
Yeah.
anyone. But this has helped her speak, and it has helped her um, sort of digest in some ways, reading it, I think, black and white on paper. She talks about it. And then she said that what she loved was having my point of view, because she thought that she always thought about her own experience.
Yeah.
And she suddenly realized, oh my God, all these children were listening to us, like all of us, you know? And that was really mind-blowing to her, because she had never really thought about it. So there were all these like little elements that I think in overall had a therapeutical sort of effect. Yeah.
It's such a good point about being pregnant. You know, like thinking about women who are pregnant now, I was thinking I had a friend a few streets away just have a baby, and having to go into the hospital where all of the COVID patients are and go on the ward and know that lots of the staff are unfortunately, you know, being
Exposed.
martyred basically, and getting infected and passing things around the hospital without knowing, because they can't, you know, they're not all getting tested. But to think about being pregnant in prison and not knowing when you're going to get out, not knowing if something very bad is going to happen, like the executions, not knowing if your baby's going to get out, just, oh, it's a
Yeah.
horrible thing to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
But
I
you're
know.
here.
Ta-da.
Both
All went well.
yeah. so I wanted to talk because both of us we had our first novels come out, and we did amazing tours and spoke, like had them translated in lots of languages, and it was an incredible experience. And then both of us have had a really long journey to what the next thing will be. And I wanted to ask you about yours, basically, and about what you have written. Like, I think firstly it would be really nice to hear about that time when the book came out, and then into, like, you know, when you started writing the next one.
Yeah. Well, the time when the book came out, of course, it was insane, because you know, as well as I do, we had to go around. There were tours, festivals in different countries I had never been, countries I had never thought of going to, but I found beautiful. And it was exciting to, you know, all these people who would come and talk to you and want answers. I think that was one thing that was really amazing to me. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I felt like people had a lot of questions, and they expected me as the author to all the answers. And I was 28, 29 at the time, and I didn't have all the answers, but I pretended I did.
Yes.
And I still don't. I still pretend that I do. And it was really amazing, like all these like older people, or you know, and they were just like, and I realized that there was this so much passion, and there's so much will to understand something that's really incomprehensible, you know. And of course they would also sometimes compare it to what they were going through. I remember when I was in Greece, for example, there was the crash, and there was a lot going on, and they wanted my experience to make sense to them and give them some answers and so on. So that was, I think, a part that was both amazing and challenging and exhausting, and and then I learned a lot about myself, about my work. I'm a different person. I'm a completely different person after that book. I learned to think, because people made me think, because they kept asking questions. And I don't think I really thought about things as much before. So that was an interesting exercise.
This is what you get when you write a really smart book, because people are like, oh, you must be really smart.
I don't know what it was, but I think there was something going on. So that was a really challenging time. And for about 2 years, I I tried to write, but very little. Um, but then I started writing again. And I think the best part of being an author for me is not so much, I mean, I'm an introvert, and I have a hard time, even though you can't tell if I do an event, but I have a hard time talking to lots of strangers all the time and being social and so
Crazy. You
on.
are so good at events because I've seen you talk.
Well, I a lot. Like, it's something that I've made myself do, and I think I'm okay now. But in general, I think what I love about it, this is when the time that I loved began. The book was doing, I thought, pretty well, and I had gone all over the world and talked to all these people. And then, like, it was the time that it was kind of over. Now I can focus and write, and I felt so confident that anything I write is gonna just do as well. And all I needed was to write, and I would just in my room. And those were some of the best years of my writing life. It didn't come to anything, but I still sort of see it as, oh, the peace I felt at
Yeah.
the time. Before I realized that making a career was a lot bigger than having one big debut.
Yeah. So this is,
Yeah.
something I wanted to get you on and talk about because your book is like, incredible. I mean, like it's beautifully written. It's about something very important, but it's also really, it's dexterous. I mean, the way that you've blended fiction and fact and done it in a way that's really emotional and human, as well as getting in a real life story and not leaving out any of the facts of what went on in prison to your family. And yeah, and Saha's book was a really big debut, and I had the same experience. But a career as an author is so much more than that. And for me, it really hit me hard at one point, and I thought, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to write? Can I write? I, had tried different things and had, like editors or say, I'm not sure about that. But I have authors who speak to me about that kind of thing all the time, actually, young authors who maybe had a recent debut, about that level of expectation. And then at the end of the day, it's an industry, and you are handing something over to somebody who might be, whether it's an agent or an editor, and wherever you are in the world, obviously you have a different home editor, that they might say no because they aren't really interested in that topic that you've written about, or they're looking for something different, or and so there's a kind of like the debut novel comes out and it's a wedding, and I think most people think that's what it's about. I'm going to be famous. I was like, I'm going to be freaking Ian McEwan. And then you're like, wow, there's like a ton of work that comes after that. And a lot of it's negotiating, okay, how am I going to build this career? Because it's not just an easy ladder. So yes, I wanted to hear your experience with those emotions as well.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot is happening at the same time in a writer's career. The facts, there are the facts that you're writing. You never stop writing. I've never stopped writing. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages that I've written in the past 7 years. And some of them are good, some of them aren't. But I realized that having one good book first probably doesn't mean everything that you write is going to be good. But you will eventually get to something good for sure if you keep writing, because somehow, somewhere, your talent or whatever your understanding was of a situation was proven. So now you just have to sort of refocus and shift focus on something else to talk about. But sometimes I also wonder that, I'm part of the minority writers. And even though I don't want to say I honestly believe that I got to just keep working hard. But I also do understand, because I've been, talking to a lot of like other minority writers as well, that sometimes we have this wall in front of us, which is the wall of tell us your personal story,
Yeah.
because it's amazing and it's fascinating. But once you want to go sort of beyond that and say, no, I'm actually a writer. Okay, yes, I had an interesting life story to talk about, but I'm actually a writer. I can talk about other things. There the suspicions begin. And then I'm not saying you cannot overcome, because we see so many writers, minority writers who have overcome and are amazing, and the industry is shifting as well. But it's sometimes does feel like you gotta just give it an extra push or two extra pushes. And so I'm like, I want to be conscious of everything that's happening. It's not always easy, but I've had trouble, I think, sort of overcome that. And I'm not saying I'm overcome writer of minority writer obstacle, but I think that's also one of them, because I keep hearing the same stories being told to me by other writers. I think that's one thing. And then the second thing is that somehow your perception, and we were talking about this earlier, your perception of success is different than the industry's perception of success. If you haven't sold 1 million, then you're probably not a success story.
Yeah.
And even though you're like, but look, it's been really great. I never thought I'd been published, and I was translated. Isn't that amazing? And they're like, no, you haven't sold as many. And I think that's one of the problems.
And we, to give some context as well, I mean, as I say, it's an industry, it's a business. Things are going on that are outside of your control. Yeah. And at the time when both our books came out, I think one came out the month after mine came out a month after yours, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Or
I don't remember, but it was very close.
Something. Yeah. It was very close. And which is funny to think of, one of us like following the other around America. But at the time, there was Waterstones in the UK had just been taken over by Daunt Books. Yeah. And when I went around with the Orion salesperson, yeah. because usually he would take an author and he would like walk them into lots of shops, have them meet the staff, give them lots of free copies, and then rely on the idea that the staff would like the author, like the book, and then the staff themselves would speak to the manager and choose to order that book in. But they had just stopped that. And I don't know when they, like, if they picked it back up at some point, but when they first bought Waterstones to get it into like a workable shape, basically, they took the ability to buy these books, as far as I was told, away from managers, and it was more of a central decision. Mm-hmm. And so that was difficult for debut novelists, because like Orion couldn't just hand sell our books like they would usually do. So they just took me around, but they said it won't make any difference to whether they order the book, but if they get it in, maybe some of them will try and sell it for you because they'll like it, but it's not up to them whether they get it in. And then over in the States at the same time, who was having a dispute? Barnes and Noble was having a dispute with our publisher and several other publishers.
Yes. And they weren't carrying their books, I remember, or not carrying it. I don't remember, but I remember not even carrying it at all.
They weren't. Yeah.
And so that
when it comes to ordering in the paperback, they say, oh, well, we didn't sell any of the hardback because we didn't carry it, but we didn't sell any of the hardback. So it becomes more difficult to get your paperbacks in. So I think when we both did tours, we did independent bookstores, didn't we?
Yeah. Yes. Only independent bookstores. And I think there's something else that's going on here too, which is like, I think just the precariousness of working environment in general in our world. Nobody is sure of the job they have. So the editors working at these publishing houses, are not there forever. They're not permanent. Their jobs are not, their positions are not permanent. So at any moment they are moved, or they go to another publishing house, or they, you know, they open their own business, and so many things, because they, so I think one thing that, which is really, really, really disastrous for a writer, because a writer needs an editor who follows her career, just like an agent.
Because
And
they
so
fall
that,
in love with you.
exactly.
Okay.
So they know how you work, and they're investing not in a book, but in your career.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore, because they can't afford that. They can't afford to have a book that doesn't sell well, because they're going to lose their jobs. And I don't know about you, but most of my main editors, my American, my English, my Italian, my French, so many are not there anymore.
Yeah.
They've moved
Right.
on. So
Yeah.
it's like starting all over again. And that's just like, I mean, that's, I think, a huge problem in our work environment in general, in this world.
Yeah.
So nobody can actually do what they can, what they want, and what they love with, you know, calmly, and without worrying about their own financial future. And these are, it's like a job like any other. They can lose it anytime. And I think that's a really, I mean, that's been just awful. That's been really awful for all of us, for all writers.
And even like a job like any other, that's such a good point. And like a job like any other, but also forward facing. And so it's about the things that you release, and whether something like in England gets picked up by the Richard and Judy Book Club or the Waterstones Book Club and just takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
That's such luck when that happens.
Yeah.
And I do think that the, I mean, it's a long time ago now, but I think that the recession really did have a big impact on the books industry, didn't it? Like, I mean, while we were selling our books, I was hearing from everybody about how, it's like editors, and we're publishing so many celebrity memoirs now because we're trying to make that money that we don't make anymore off novels. And the dispute with Barnes and Noble was about Barnes and Noble requiring the big six publishers to pay them to put their books at the front of the store. I think it was something along those lines. And so it's like everybody's being squeezed everywhere. And yeah, your editors, and I mean, both Arzu and Sarah are, not there anymore.
And so who are you? I mean, you have a second book. I mean, you've had your second book come out already, but who do you go? Because now you're an unknown. I mean, of course you've published and so on, but you're again an unknown to the editorial world, because those people are not there anymore. They're doing something completely different. They're not even in another publishing house. They're doing something completely different. And so you can't rely on anything. And I think it's this precariousness that is going to kill us all, because you can't. You don't have anything to rely on, and you're in your room and you keep writing, and you don't know who's going to be out there anymore once you come out, you know?
Before I pressed record, one of the things that we were talking about as well is, like, for me, I think women who, at the age that we were when we put our books out, who think, I've written a novel and it's really good, I'm going to submit it to an agent and then an editor. I tend to be quite bold people and quite confident people. And then you get that drop in confidence when you, after everything that's happened, because really, I think almost what you get told is, you're going to be really big now. Like, there is no, you better watch the sales, you better be careful, or like, there's a long career ahead of you. It's all just a lot of fanfare and exciting things, and which is really nice, and but then you get that drop in confidence. And for me, when people ask me about, this didn't go so well for me, I thought that things were gonna, I maybe had a big debut and now this isn't going so well, or And I say that it has to be about confidence, because as an author, you have to have that authoritative voice that makes people open a book and think, she's got me. I trust her. I'm on the ride. Like, let's see where we go. And it's also about having that confidence, because this is a job where agents come and go, editors come and go. And no one thinks agents come and go of the, the new writers I know, but they do. And you have to be the motorbike. You have to be confident enough to sit there on your own and be like, I'm, as you were saying, I'm confident in my book. And that's what I have, and that's maybe all I have, but I'm confident in my book. And I'm going to find someone to publish this.
Yes. That's all you have, really.
Yeah. But that has to be enough, doesn't it? I mean, like, it sounds dire, but we're also saying that in a nice way.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
We're fine.
Keep working. No, I think because of like everything that we've said so far, it is the only thing you have. If you don't have that, then it's all like I don't know, I can't think of the word now, but it's like a bubble, and it bursts at any moment, that beautiful bubble. And so you can't rely on it to carry you forward forever. Not that it doesn't exist and it's wonderful and you've done good with your first book and so on, and that will give you something to work on, but at the same time, it's not something that will protect you, and you need something to protect you, and that something is only you. And people who love you and read your work and say, you still got it, you're good, you're talented, keep on doing, and that what else you can't do until you become someone who is super established. You just gotta.
How much does reader feedback, make a difference to you as well? Because obviously, like, your book spoke to so many people and spoke of something that hadn't really been spoken about.
Yeah, no, it does. I'm while I'm writing, I'm definitely so open to suggestions and feedback. I never think that what I've done is perfect. Never. Like, it can always be better. I think we should never think that in general. Once we think something is perfect, then we're done. And, there's
also,
nothing to do it.
If you're like aiming for perfect, you're never going to get there. If you're aiming for perfect, man, you'll never publish anything.
Exactly. And some people do have good ideas and they make you think and they make you see it from another perspective. So I'm very much open to, I never get mad when I get bad feedback. I'm always, but then once the book is done, it's a different story. And then that's when the whole thinking part comes in, I start thinking about all the things I didn't think about. And that isn't, but that is an exercise that will come handy for the next book and the next book. So in general, I love feedback. I love seeing things in a new light. Of course, it's devastating, especially when the book is done, to get, negative feedback, or to get something, isn't as great as we thought, and things like that people say.
They don't sound like nice.
I cry for a day.
They're probably like not readers. They were looking for some sci-fi.
Also, you never know what people are looking for too,
Yeah,
that's why I always say to writers, actually, that whole thing about this is what the market wants, this is what the market doesn't want, and what you were saying earlier about trends, you can't rely on any of that either, because none of it is really true. It could be true one moment and not true another. So you gotta just keep writing what you think matters.
Yeah.
It's a difficult journey.
Okay, so I have some lighter questions, but I think that will hopefully be very helpful to some people. And I mean, I definitely feel very positive. I can't wait to read your new book. I'm really excited about it.
So. Read it.
So my question, I usually ask this at the beginning and I forgot. I was kind of like excited to leap into one of the other questions. But what was baby Sahar like in terms of your writing? Like, when did you start writing as a child? You know, were you interested in imaginary worlds? How did that develop for you? And did you go to university for it? I don't know.
Well, I studied comparative literature. I have a BA in comparative literature, but I never did creative writing. I never studied it, you know, at school or university. I just thought I was very old fashioned. I thought that, you know, creative writing classes didn't exist in, you know, 200 years ago. So I'm going to do what they did and just keep reading. And well, that's why it took me a long time to write my first book. I wrote 3 books, 3 novels before Jacaranda.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just kept writing and learning and writing and then meanwhile being rejected, because you write something and you still want to have it published, and then you realize maybe it's not so good. But the baby Sahar, I always wanted to write, but I wanted to become a poet in the beginning.
Wow.
So I started like writing poetry when I was like 15, more or less, school in 22.
I've had 1 second, Sahar.
And
it froze again. So could
okay.
you go back to saying I started writing poetry when I was 15?
Yes. So I started writing poetry when I was 15, when I was in high school, and then I continued till I was like about 22. And then at 22, I realized that like I wanted to tell stories more than poems. Like I love poems, but it wasn't really my way of communicating.
Yeah.
And then I was at the time, I had just moved to Italy, and so even if I wanted to do a creative writing class, I couldn't, because it was all in Italian, and I had started learning Italian, but I didn't want to write in Italian. I wanted to write in English, so I just thought I'm just going to learn it on my own. And then so I just kept writing and writing. So that's why, you know, about the second book thing, because I had those 7 years of a lot of writing, and finally I got to Jacaranda, I thought that I would never have to do that again.
Yeah, but it's still,
like
the
every
work is
book
the same.
going to that.
You think at some point you'll get to somewhere where you'll just be like churning them out.
Oh, wow. So, I can't keep on doing the 7-year thing. It's exhausting.
And then I wanted, before we go.
Oh yeah, so that was basically the base.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, before we go, 2 questions. Could you recommend a book that you read recently or are reading currently to viewers and listeners, because this is also released as a podcast? And also, can you recommend somebody else for me to have on? So it will be like, I always have on people that I've read their books and I like them. You might know somebody who I've already read their book, but it might be a suggestion out the blue, or it's a new author I can try.
Sure. So the book that I have recently read and just absolutely loved was Flights by Olga Tokarczuk, I think.
I know what you mean.
The Nobel Prize, last year's Nobel Prize winner. She's Polish. I can't pronounce her last name. I got it once, and then I lost it again. But but it's amazing. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's a novel, but it's just so experimental, and it's a travelogue as well. And I loved it because I'd always read men writing about traveling, especially traveling alone.
Yeah.
And she does it, and she tells stories amidst all these like little texts about writing. It's just like, you just don't want it to ever end. And it's just so beautiful. So I've just ordered another novel of hers, which is more classic novel. So I recommend reading her. And who I recommend you to have on, well, so many people come to mind, but it should be someone I know personally, or just in general?
Just like somebody basically that if you love their writing, and particularly if they're undersung as well, that's something that is appealing.
Yes, yes. Well, I can think of two people I know personally. One of them is Hala Aylan, and she is a Palestinian writer, and she wrote her debut novel called Salt Houses or Salt House. And she's amazing. I read her book recently, and I thought she it was amazing, and I got in touch with her on Instagram, which makes life easier.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. And another Iranian writer who lives here, and she's written 2 books, and her new book is going to come out. And her name is Jasmine Darsnik, and she's amazing. Again, Instagram friend, but I had read her work. These are the 2 people. Well, of course, so many, but these are the 2 people that come to mind.
And what are her books about?
Well, the first her debut novel was it was called A Good Daughter, and it's about her relationship with her mother. It's also like kind of autobiographical, but fictional. And then her second book, Songs of a Captive Bird.
Oh,
it's about Forough Farrokhzad, which is who is a poet, one of our like revolutionary sort of feminist poets, female poets, and who died very young in a car accident. But she sort of changed the the way we look at poetry, which was then still something very male oriented. And also she was very open, and then at the time Iran was going through this modernization. It was before the revolution. She had a huge impact. She was like she would have been an influencer other than a poet, but in a very good way. So her third book I haven't, but I know that it's based in San Francisco, but it hasn't come out yet.
Okay. Well, and that second one was called Songs of a
Captive Bird.
Okay, very thanks. Well,
but again, I'll write them to you.
Yes, please do. That would be good. Well, thank you so much. That was it. And thank you for joining me. This is so nice because we haven't seen each other for a very long time now.
I know. I missed you. It was so nice seeing you.
5 years, something like that. Yeah. I'm gonna stop the record. So wave goodbye to everyone.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.